The syndrome of collective loneliness. Nighttime Vancouver seemed translucent. Rain trailed lazily down darkened storefronts, neon lights pooling in puddles like tired thoughts abandoned by passersby. The streets were nearly empty, but the city didn't feel deserted. It had simply forgotten how to notice itself. Tobias Reed stood at the window of his 13th floor office in the psychology department. Behind him, the soft glow of a desk lamp, a mug of cold tea, and a folder labeled Case Studies, Urban Disconnection. In front of him, a city where no one truly knew anyone. He pressed his forehead to the glass. "I see you," he whispered into the alley below, where a figure without an umbrella crossed the street, leaving no trace in anyone's awareness. The figure turned a corner and disappeared. Not a single car slowed. Tobias opened his notebook. Day 187. Erasure incidents are becoming more frequent. People report not being heard in cafes, forgotten by coworkers, unrecognized by neighbors, even by family. No hostility, just as if the current of perception skips over them. As if the psyche mass deletes the excess, a defense mechanism against social overload. He exhaled. Once, he wrote academic papers on group empathy, lectured about the power of human connection. Now, he felt the rupture not in society, but in perception, and the feeling wasn't just theoretical anymore. After divorcing Emma, he'd tried calling his brother. No answer. Not then, not since, not even on his birthday. Maybe he was busy, or maybe he simply didn't notice the call. Years ago, at a train station, Tobias remembered ignoring a woman shouting for her missing child. He'd stood there, phone pressed to his ear, pretending not to hear. Back then, he thought, it's not my concern. Now, that moment returned often. What if that was the first signal? One evening, leaving the university, he greeted the security guard. The man looked through him. Not rudely, just through. Tobias didn't take offense. He understood. It wasn't personal. It was a symptom. The syndrome of collective loneliness. He first wrote down the phrase a week ago. Now he circled it. Observe before it's too late. Capture the moment of disappearance. But he didn't know he was already beginning to fade. And the next time he stepped into the elevator, the mirrored steel would no longer reflect his face. The university campus felt noisy by day, but hollow. Students' voices bounced off the glass walls, creating the illusion of presence. Tobias Reed sat in a small conference room, watching a screen filled with flickering faces, participants in his new research study. He had recruited a group of volunteers through an anonymous forum about social invisibility issues. Dozens responded, and nearly all of them said the same thing. The waiter served everyone but me, twice. A coworker asked where I was yesterday, though we had lunch together. My husband didn't say good morning. He said he didn't notice I was in the room. They didn't seem mentally unstable. On the contrary, they were tired, calm, almost resigned. Their stories repeated like episodes of a shared dream, looped through different voices. Tobias listened in silence. Sometimes he took notes. Sometimes he just watched. After the session, he returned to his office, passing the bulletin board in the corridor. None of his recent papers were posted among the new publications. Yet he'd submitted one to the journal a month ago. No one asked about it. No one seemed to notice. Even his assistant, who usually edited his drafts, said she hadn't received anything. One of his colleagues, Professor Lay, walked past him in the hallway without even a nod. Later, during a seminar, Lay called Tobias's idea unverifiable by definition and added, Reed is too immersed in his own theories. The room responded with polite silence, or maybe indifference. Back in his office, Tobias wrote on the whiteboard, "What if the brain is actively refusing to see?" He remembered an article on cognitive filtering, the theory that the human brain discards up to 90% of sensory data daily to avoid overload. But what if, in a city full of faces, noise, requests, advertisements, the psyche had gone further? Not just filtering, deleting, erasing, nullifying the harmless, the unremarkable, the unseen. He called it the deletion mechanism of social units, like a computer closing background windows to keep the processor from crashing. Except these windows were people. He opened the newsfeed. One headline mentioned a transit company where drivers complained about weird shift rosters. People were listed, but no one had seen them. A dispatcher said, "He was definitely there. We had coffee in the morning. Then he was just gone, and no one remembers him leaving." Another article, a woman in a hospital no one on staff recognized. She had a patient file, test results, ID, but no doctor claimed to have treated her. One nurse said, "I've never seen this woman before, but look, her bracelet has my name on it." Tobias jotted in his notebook, "Not malice, not indifference, self-preservation." The collective unconscious protects itself by ejecting those who don't cross the threshold of relevance. He felt a slight shiver, not fear, recognition. That night he walked home. Passing by a storefront, he waved to the night guard inside. The man didn't look up. He met his first transparent person in the walkway between SkyTrain stations. It was late evening, a few commuters rushed down the escalator, and only one man stood motionless, leaning against the wall as if waiting not for a train, but for a gaze. He looked directly at Tobias. "You can see me?" the man asked, not moving closer. His voice was calm, slightly hoarse. "Yes," Tobias replied. "Then you're almost one of us." The man vanished into shadow before Tobias could say anything. But from that moment, he began noticing others. People whom, he now realized, the city no longer saw. They were everywhere. In parks, behind billboards, on the fringes of stations where no one ever stopped. They didn't beg, didn't interfere. They simply were. In the underground tunnel of an old train station, he saw a woman sitting on the steps with an open sketchbook. She was drawing faces. Dozens of faces, faint like memories. "These are the ones I still remember," she said without looking up. "The others, the city took them." Tobias felt a light dizziness. The air here felt different, denser, as if saturated not with oxygen, but with unspoken words. He was surrounded by those who had slipped out of statistics, attention, memory. And yet, here, in the shadows, they finally looked at one another. "We call it the second layer," said the same man from the walkway. He stepped closer and held out his hand. "Ellis, I used to be a teacher, history. I loved explaining how the past shaped the present. But one day the students just stopped showing up. Parents wouldn't respond. The principal said I'd never had a class." He shrugged. "I didn't quit. I was just erased." Tobias nodded. He didn't know what to say, but he understood. Every confession like that left a print of something real. "Not everyone copes," said a young woman who appeared beside them. Light hair, tired but attentive eyes. Lena. "Some lose themselves. Some start hearing voices. Some try to go back, but no system lets them through anymore. Even turnstiles won't respond. The city no longer considers them part of itself." They walked slowly through the corridor, without a destination, just side by side. Ahead, an argument was brewing. Two men, one younger, the other older, were whisper fighting. "We shouldn't hide. We could push our way back, make ourselves known." "To whom?" the older man sighed. "You think they'll remember us if we show up with signs? They won't even lift their eyes." "We deserve a choice," the younger insisted, "or at least a voice." "You have it here," Ellis said, stopping. "Out there, you lose it forever." Tobias wondered. To be seen, is that a gift or a sentence? He stayed in this layer longer than he planned, and each day, returning to the surface grew harder. The first signs were almost imperceptible. At first, his reflection in the mirror, slightly blurred, as if the glass had fogged only in the spot where his face should be. Tobias ran his hand across the surface. It was dry, spotless, but his features seemed to fade into the background. He blamed it on fatigue, on poor sleep, on imagination. Then, the payment terminal at a cafe failed. The cashier didn't look him in the eyes, simply rang up the next customer as if Tobias weren't there. He didn't make a scene. He just stepped aside. Standing by the door, he suddenly remembered a long-forgotten moment. A woman on Broadway, trying to speak to him, seemingly asking for help. Her lips were trembling, a crumpled paper in her hand. And he'd passed by without slowing down. An urgent email had lit up on his phone. If everyone paused for everyone, the world would stop, he'd thought at the time. Now he saw what that looked like from the outside. A person who wasn't there. Not in the lens of consciousness, not in the field of empathy. He took out his phone. The front camera struggled to register his face. The autofocus flickered, unable to lock on. He snapped a photo. On the screen, a reflection of the street, a blurry smudge, a vague outline of a shoulder. Recording failure, signal lost, perception is rejecting the observer. He opened his laptop and accessed the university security feeds. Found the footage of him entering the building that morning. The hallway was empty. The doors opened, but no one walked through. The timestamp matched. He opened his observation journal. Is the process irreversible? Or can one be stabilized through affirmation? Even devices fail to register me, just like other people's minds. I'm phasing out. In the bathroom mirror, only the sink and tiles reflected. No eyes, no facial lines, as if the glass no longer wished to remember him. He sat on the bed in the dark, leaving the lights off. For the first time, he truly understood how those he had studied must have felt. Not rejected, not forgotten, just deleted. And maybe only now he was beginning to understand them. He didn't quite realize how he'd gotten there. First, he went down an old stairwell leading to a sealed-off station lobby. Then, through a door without signage, one he'd never noticed before. No maps, no instructions, just a quiet certainty. This is where I'm supposed to go. The tunnel led downward, like a network of veins feeding the city's forgotten anatomy. No ads here, no glass facades, no Wi-Fi signals. Only brick, aging wires, and voices. Quiet, deliberate, unhurried. They were waiting for him. "You hesitated," said Ellis, the silver-haired man with silent eyes. He'd met him once already, in the walkway. "I didn't think I'd return," Tobias admitted. No one does, until they're no longer seen. Down here, people didn't live like outcasts, but like those finally free from background noise. But it would be a mistake to romanticize them. Meals were rationed, twice a day. Canned soup, grains, sometimes vegetables smuggled in from the surface by runners. Electricity came from makeshift batteries hidden in cable shafts. Sometimes the lights went out, sometimes the generators failed. Then, candles. Some slept on wooden pallets, others in forgotten utility rooms. On the walls, handwritten notes marked sleeping spots. Not from selfishness, but from the knowledge that without order, things fell apart. "We call it the second contour," said Lena, a soft-voiced woman who welcomed newcomers. But not everyone agreed on what it meant to be. "Ellis keeps us here," muttered someone in the shadows as Tobias walked by. "Maybe we should surface, let them see what they've lost." "That doesn't work," Ellis replied calmly. "It's been tried." "By whom? You?" the voice snapped. "Maybe you're just afraid of vanishing, even here." Tension held for a moment, then dissolved. But it lingered, Later, alone with Lena, Tobias noticed she stared into the darkness of the corridor, as if waiting for someone. "Do you have anyone still up there?" he asked gently. She nodded. "My mother. I know she's still alive. Sometimes I think I can hear her calling me." She clasped her hands. "But I can't go back. The city won't let me. Even her front door probably wouldn't open." "Are you afraid of forgetting her?" he asked. "No," she said. "I'm afraid she'll forget me." He had no answer. For the first time in a long while, he felt not loneliness, not confusion, not dread, but peace. Not bright, not joyful, just calm, clear, like the light of low lamps under a concrete ceiling. They weren't hiding, they weren't escaping. They were simply existing, in a city no longer on the map, where every name was known by heart, and every shadow by the way it walked. He learned about the method by accident, or so it seemed. In one of the rooms, behind a curtain, stood an old projector. Someone was playing a faded lecture, the sound trembling. On the screen, a professor of neuropsychology spoke about forced neuroadaptation, when an overloaded brain could be artificially rebooted by stimulating certain regions. The method had once been used to bring patients out of dissociative states. "Do you think it works?" Tobias asked Ellis. Ellis slowly sat down on a crate by the wall. His gaze was tired. "I tried," he said at last. "Years ago. I wanted to go back. I thought I could be part of it again. And I made it almost all the way. Doors opened. The ticket machine worked. I saw the street." He paused. "But at the bus stop," he clenched his hands, "my son was standing there. I called his name. He turned and didn't recognize me. Just turned away. And I knew I was no longer someone he could remember. So I came back, without even noticing how." Tobias stayed silent for a long time. He thought of Noah, his younger brother. They rarely spoke. Sometimes exchanged brief messages, but less and less often. The last one Noah had sent read, "You've kind of disappeared. Everything okay?" And he hadn't replied. What would happen if he vanished completely? What if his brother forgot him? Not out of neglect, but because it was easier that way. Quieter? He looked into the tunnel, where people were lighting candles. Their glow was weak, but alive. He felt no fear, only a strange calm before a choice. To return meant becoming visible again, back to a world where people turned away, where presence was no guarantee of connection, only an illusion, where even family looked through you, as if behind glass. But to stay meant disappearing completely, becoming a shadow to those who once knew him. No work, no university, not even a name. "If I leave, will I forget everything?" he asked Lena. "Not everything," she said, "but much. Because this layer isn't just a place. It's a memory no one else shares. It holds you here, and if you let go of it." She didn't finish. She didn't need to. He sat at the edge of the corridor, where two worlds met. Above, a city of windows that never opened. Below, a city of voices that could still be heard, even in silence. He didn't make his decision right away. He simply closed his eyes. Sometimes the choice isn't to leave. Sometimes it's to stay. To truly stay, where someone still sees you, and where you, in return, still remember someone else. Morning in the underground city didn't feel like morning. There was no sunrise, only the slow hum of light bulbs and quiet footsteps. But the sense of a new day was still there, not in the ticking of clocks, but in something internal. Tobias didn't wake from an alarm, but because someone had placed a mug of hot water next to him. On the wall opposite, a hand-drawn sun. Not perfect, childlike. He stepped into the main gallery, where Lena was pouring soup from a large thermos. People, dozens of pale faces, now filled with life, sat on old pallets. Some read, others simply sat beside one another in silence. He caught someone's gaze. Not a fleeting glance, a real one. Here, people didn't look through you, they looked into you. "Are you staying?" Lena asked casually. He didn't answer right away. But he didn't look away either. In that moment, he understood. Staying wasn't surrender. It was choosing a space where you weren't corrected, simplified, or erased, where each person was vulnerable, but whole. Later, on one of the brick walls, he began sketching a diagram. Not for publication, not for a paper, just a map of what they had built here. A network where every node was a human being. No arrows, no hierarchy. Only connections. Connection. In a nearby alcove, someone asked, "Where's Marie? She always comes to breakfast." "Don't know," someone replied. "Maybe she went back up. Or maybe." They didn't finish. The pause hung in the air. Here, even disappearances had no final explanation. Tobias looked upward, to where, behind layers of concrete, streets still flowed, lectures still ran, phones still rang. Then downward, into the warm half-light. He wasn't searching for meaning anymore, but he had begun to hear the voices, real ones, not background noise, spoken aloud, without screens, without filters. And maybe, just maybe, that was the beginning. Not where things are visible, but where they are heard.